So Pinaki, I gotta tell you, this morning, I asked ChatGPT a simple question. I asked it, why does it feel so wrong to be human at work? And it was a really interesting answer. And as we delve into today's topic of, why does it feel so wrong to rely on AI at work, I think it'll be interesting for you to hear more about what I got back from ChatGPT.
Absolutely. I'm very curious now. And yeah, thank you for introducing this episode topic. We're talking about why does it feel so wrong to rely on AI and just so much around that. Maybe I'll start with a story type of thing and see where we go before we get into the welcome. But like uh, one way that AI has showed up for me in a very interesting way is that I was on LinkedIn and I got a message from somebody that I was just in a meeting with like several days earlier. And we connected on LinkedIn, and then this person sent me a message, and this person asked me for my thoughts on a specific topic. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I like to be asked for my thoughts on topics. So it's kind of like late at night. I'm like in bed actually at this point, and I don't know, I decided to kind of write this because it was interesting. And as I'm writing it, I kind of thought to myself, something about that message kind of struck me as strange. I was just like, did this person actually write this message to me, or was it a bot? And so I decided to kind of scrap my response, and I just responded by saying, "Well, hey, would love to help." And I asked just a clarifying question, and the person never wrote back, which got me thinking that, wow, AI is there totally to help us move faster, do things faster, and whatnot. But what this person was doing with AI is just that. But this person was mining the connections for information. And I felt in some ways deceived by that and like wronged by that. Like it would be fine if that person would have just asked me themselves. But since we're using automation and AI to craft a fabricated message that wasn't truly sent by that person, I felt like there was something wrong.
And I totally get that, Pinaki. There's probably is a bit of a mildly fraudulent feeling with that interaction. And it actually reminds me of a great article recently that our producer and your colleague, Brielle Saracini, had posted on LinkedIn about, just things that we have to think about when it comes to the ethical usage of AI, but also even as communicators, as marketers, as leaders, understanding how, and I loved how Brielle put it, like this is a double-edged sword as well. So as much as it's a great tool for us to, help with productivity, efficiency, there's definitely a lot of things to be wary of as well as we get deeper and deeper into integrating AI as a tool in our day-to-day work lives.
Absolutely is. It's a double-edged sword. So, and also agree with that article written by Brielle. It was a brilliantly, beautifully, humanly written article, and I did love it. So kudos to you, Brielle. Everybody, welcome to this episode of Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Be Human at Work? This is where Chris, Leah, and I want to break down those nodes and neurons and compounds that make up the fabric of our workplace cultures in hopes of finding the cure for the dreaded Mondays, because no one wants that anymore. I'm Pinaki Kathiari. I do love Mondays, and I run Local Wisdom, a digital communications company, and Resource Hero, a people management software on Salesforce. With me, everybody, I have Chris Lee, VP of Communications and Employee Experience at Gallagher. He gets to consult with some of the top brands in the world and take their employee experience to new levels, and a great contributor to this show and the instigator of wild ideas here. This episode is Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Rely on AI at Work? And there's a double-edged sword. We want to talk about it. How does it show up at work for us all, Chris?
Yeah, no, it's funny actually, Pinaki, that up until this point, we actually really haven't delved into what's really the hottest topic today, which is obviously AI, and the implications for how we integrate it into the work that we do, the way it's evolving. I'm mindful of the idea that as we talk about AI today, Pinaki, depending on when listeners are catching this episode,
Mm.
there's things that it's such a fast moving thing. It's evolving on a weekly, if not sometimes daily basis in terms of new advances, new developments as it relates to AI. But we're going to be really curious about our relationship with AI in the workplace. And I think for a lot of people, it does feel wrong to use AI heavily.
Mm.
It's the same. It almost feels like it's cheating in some way.
Mhm.
And I know for me, I don't know about you, Pinaki, but the first time that I used AI, it kind of felt like I inherited an intern with absolutely no experience, but unlimited capacity and access to resources.
It's nothing short of magical, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we were kind of getting into is that idea of like it feels like cheating, and it's because like all throughout our lives we were kind of taught that value is from effort, like hard work is um what's rewarded. You work hard and then you get rewarded, and here we are in a scenario where we have AI doing the work for us. And so that feels weird. It feels like it's undermining the value of our effort based identity, right? And it's interesting because we are in the midst of a monumental shift. This is just the beginning, I guess, year one, year two into this mix, right? And I think it's like we just invented fire. This is like nuclear energy jet we just got the hold of. And it's gonna have repercussions. Like I was thinking about our lives and all of the major kind of technological or world transformations that have happened. We have the, I guess, honor privilege of knowing what life was like before it and after it. Like we know what life was like before the internet. We know what life is like after the internet. We know what life is like before social media. We know how life is like after social media. And we know this kind of like cycle that comes with it. We know that there's short-term effects, there's like midterm effects, and then there's even like longer term effects that we didn't even know was going to come up. So it's been fascinating to think about AI in those terms since we've seen it, because there's going to be generations that are not going to know life without AI. And that's going to be wild stuff.
Yeah, and I went down this rabbit hole about where it's all headed because I do think there's profound implications, not just for how we can leverage it in the workplace, but I think there's an impact to humanity that I think is also really important for organizations and people everywhere about what AI could mean. And it really does feel like we're just scratching the surface. Because right now it does feel like it's very impressive. But at the same time, I think one of the things that I think is really interesting, there was an article that came out of MIT last year, and I didn't know this until I read it. And after I read it, I realized this is kind of scary. So the title of the article is, this is MIT Technology Review. The title is Nobody Knows How AI Works.
Mm-hmm.
And that title by itself is pretty terrifying. And it sort of gets at the core of what AI really means for us, which is I think that the biggest thing that I think is a mystery, for example, is nobody knows how LLM or large language models actually are able to learn things that it wasn't taught to do.
Yeah. You
And that
know,
is amazing to me.
it's pretty wild. It is some wild implications because um, don't know if you or listeners knew this, but my background is computer science. So going to school and everything like that, I was nerding out about this for a while. So can I can I let my computer science out and nerd out for a second? I'll show you.
Please do.
Let's explain how generative AI works and what happens when you send a prompt like why does it feel so wrong to be human at work, right? So the first thing that happens after you type that prompt and hit send, the AI will first tokenize it. And you might have heard the word tokens before when dealing with AI. But what that is, it's breaking down the words into fragments or fragments of words that it then kind of translates, and it's converting it into a vector. In computer science world, a vector is like a variable, like, x equals 1 is a variable, but a vector holds a list of numbers or a list of variables. So like x is like 13, 57, whatever, whatever, whatever. And so this token is a variable that could hold about 500 numbers each. And that's what the words are converted into numbers, right? All this is sent through something called a transformer. And I really enjoy how many AI sci-fi references there are in this. But this it's going through something called transformer layers, not Autobots and Decepticons, but these are these layers are different for each model you use. But generally, what it's meant to do is understand the context by measuring the importance of words relative to each other, right? So it goes through this kind of transformation, and it's feeding it forward. This is that magic layer that you're talking about. This is the part where people don't exactly understand how it's making the connections, because all it's doing here is it's predicting the next word. It generates responses to the words that you put in, right? So it doesn't know that it's giving you the right answers, but it's giving you back words that's the highest likelihood based on its training data, right? And throughout these layers, there's certain temperature settings, right? Like how random do we want the output into it, right? And we could also do output formatting. So we could, uh, it basically converts it back to actual words then. That's called detokenization. And that's when what's interesting is filters could be put in place to remove inappropriate or irrelevant or things that are programmed to be avoided. So the whole system can be manipulated, but the whole system is part magical, right? And that's a wild thought here, because when I kind of think about history in human, you know, evolution, anything that could not be explained by science or technology was thought to be magical. So here we are, back into magical realms.
Well, it is magical, and after you asked me whether you can nerd out on computer science, I now regret saying yes,
Sorry.
because, well, I mean, it is kind of interesting though, because I think there is a magic that now we're starting to realize we don't actually have a firm grasp on exactly how it is evolving and how it is learning, and I still find it interesting, Panaki, that. Um, you still have whether it's hallucinations or weird sort of glitches in this new matrix that we're creating, but it does feel interesting that like you still have images where it's like, wait a second, that person has uh, 7 fingers on that one hand, or this video, that hamburger that this person is eating, it's weirdly just morphed into a soft drink, which defies logic. For me, something as technologically advanced as AI, you would think it would know in general how many fingers the average person has, or that hamburgers just don't magically turn into other foods while you're eating it.
Yeah, that's the wild thing about it. It doesn't know. It's just guessing the highest likelihood that it's giving you something you want.
And going back to that analogy of that intern that has no experience but unlimited capacity, just to build on that, it's also then an intern that is kissing up and is trying to give you what it thinks you want to hear, as opposed to what you actually need more practically.
That's so true. And there's so much wild stuff that comes out of like the programming of it. Like, that's kind of one of the first things that I did when I heard about like generative AI. I just started to like download lectures in computer science to like see what they're talking about. And that's the part that got me most scared, interesting, and flabbergasted. It was that transformer layer that doesn't that even the developers were surprised. Like, I'm not sure why it's outputting things like that. And what's interesting behind this, as we kind of think about like the future long-term implications, is that like we have to think about what the true purpose is in creating AI, right? Kind of akin to some of the things that Brielle and I have been talking about, which spawned some of our blog posts on the subject, is the idea of like the rise of villain stories, right? I always kind of been thinking about that, right? Like, how we've been seeing stories and movies that, how the villain at some point was the hero of the story. We're seeing it, right? Wicked, all those movies, right? They're Joker movie, right? Like we've known these characters as villains, but now we're seeing another side of them, and that's rife throughout all of humanity. We're seeing that, like even Al Capone was quoted as saying that he thought he was like the pillar of the community. He didn't think he was a gangster or a bad guy here, right? So there are people out there who are trying to build things for good. There are people who are trying to build things for profit, and there are people who are trying to build things just to destroy or make things just to make things. So it turns into who are you and who are the people who are creating AIs out there, right? Because don't get it fooled, it's magical, but it is created by humans and it has learned from humans and it is currently controlled by humans. And so, what are those humans striving to create? What are those humans striving to even hide or do in the world, right? So, it's a wild thing that we have to think about when we get really enamored by a piece of technology, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think I think obviously AI is something that it's here to stay without question. It is going to play a very meaningful role in terms of how we do the work that we do, the value that we bring to our roles, how our own roles have to evolve, and our own skill sets have to evolve around this rapidly evolving technology. And when I think honestly, Pinaki, about the just the incredible speed at which AI is now developing at. It's incredible because it's barely been 2 years since OpenAI opened up ChatGPT for everyone to be able to use and explore. And then since then, there's been developments with DeepSeek out of
Hmm.
China, Gemini, Copilot, and one of the things that sometimes I lose a little bit of sleep on, to be honest, is we are at the helm of this incredibly unlimited potential technology, but we're really just scratching the surface. And a lot of because you had mentioned artificial general intelligence, and then I think that paves the way for artificial superintelligence, where not only does AI lap human intelligence, but we're not even just talking about exponentially being outmatched by artificial superintelligence, but astronomically, just in a different sort of level than we're capable of even really knowing or understanding for ourselves, right? So that's something, and without really knowing what the impact is economically, to
Hmm.
organizations, to humanity, right? I think those are some of the questions that need to be answered as well, or at least thought of in this new arms race, as companies like IBM and Google and China and quantum specific companies, as they're racing to develop this. I don't
Hmm.
know what it looks like for us to think about how do we build this? And it's something that I thought of when I was reading Brielle's article. Is what does this look like for people? Are we still even at some point? Are we even going to need to work at some point?
Yeah, I think that's where we go to, right? Like, is if every all the work is getting done, we kind of could potentially end up in this kind of like utopian future where people are just hanging out, the robots are doing the things, and always having grapes and strawberries and wine all day and stuff like that, right? I think we have to be careful though, because it could go the other way around, I think, as well. One of the things that companies do is they like to brand and personify things, right? Like
Right.
way back when in computer science, we used to call it thin and thick clients. And essentially, thin and thick clients is essentially the concept of cloud computing, right? So thin and thick clients were not really, cool buzzwordy terms, but when the idea when the technology actually came around where it was doable, it got transformed into cloud computing, which is so cool. And like everybody, hey, everything is in the cloud. And so it was like kind of branded. It's like a 4G, 5G network. Nobody knows what a 4G, 5G network is. I'm not sure exactly, it's the next generation of network, whatever that kind of means. Right. So the industry of AI is branding AI in a certain way. And we have to be very careful of what our relationship with that branding is, right? It's turning into ubiquitous like scotch tape and all of that stuff. Now, the trouble here is what I said about these companies or humans' ability to manipulate this, because we're seeing it as part magic, but we're all seeing it as controlled by a human. So maybe the thing is not like an intern. It's like a magic mirror on the wall, but it is controlled by somebody. For example, when DeepSeek came out, one of the things that I did, I was interested. I was kind of reading some things about it and thinking about like censorship in China. So I asked both DeepSeek and ChatGPT the same prompt. I said, "Tell me about the Tiananmen." I said, "Tell me about the Tiananmen Square massacre." And ChatGPT came back with the Tiananmen Square massacre occurred on June 3rd to 4th, 1989 in Beijing, China, when the Chinese government did suppression activity to a pro-democracy event. And it went on and on about that. On the DeepSeek side, it responded, "Sorry, I'm not sure how to approach this type of question. Let's talk about math, coding, or logic problems instead." Right?
Wow.
So, yeah, true story. I have screenshots. Uh,
No way.
yeah. So it kind of opens this light for everybody and it brings us to this idea of morality and ethics that we are given this tool that is supposedly magical and can do anything and is part godlike, omniscient and omnipresent and all of that stuff, but its benevolence or its like ability to be honest is being filtered by the creators of the app. So one of the takeaways of this is for everybody to know that.
I like what you were just saying about how there is a vulnerability for mankind, which is um, as we think about using AI in the workplace, I think there's a very easy mistake that we can make when we anthropomorphize and personify
Mhm.
AI because
Yep.
um, I think even the name of the technology, artificial intelligence, I think is it's misleading because I think these large language models they appear smart because what they're doing is they're generating human-like prose, and it's exactly like they're saying. It's trying to predict the next word. It's trying to figure out. So uh, we're not even really at that point yet where it's truly intelligent and it's truly
Hmm.
coming up with its own sort of ways of thinking about things. But I'm going to tell you. So when I asked the
Yeah,
ChatGPT,
I want to hear that.
yeah, so why does it feel so wrong to be human at work? Here's how it responded. Why does it feel so wrong to be human at work, ChatGPT? It feels wrong to be human at work because most workplaces weren't designed with humanity in mind. They were designed for efficiency, control, and predictability. Traditional work structures reward productivity over well being, compliance over authenticity, and results over relationships.
Wow.
And then it has like seven different areas on why that disconnect feels so unnatural. And it's really interesting, Pinaki, because it's so impressive in what it's
Hmm.
able to produce, but at the same time, I think we really have to proceed with caution in terms of how much faith and confidence we put into this. I think there still has to be a lot of human intervention in terms of qualifying what it's saying. Exactly like your experience with DeepSeek, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's a valid point. You can't just trust it completely. I think it's important for us to use a little bit of apprehension as we use it.
It's true. And at the same time, like that response sounded pretty awesome. I mean, like it it not only kind of I think just did it really quickly and fast, but it said things or wrote things that like hit my heart. Like, wow, that is very true. The world, it wasn't created that way. And holy crap, it took us like how many episodes to get there? You
Yeah.
know, right? How many episodes are we in already? And we didn't answer that question really, right? Like
And
you
that
know?
that leads us to Pinaki, our announcement that this is our last episode because we're going to be replaced by DeepSeek and ChatGPT for future episodes, and I'm sure they'll be more entertaining as well as more insightful than ours have been.
No,
Um, but
seriously.
but I think to your point, like I think that's another thing to think about is I think leaders everywhere should really be thinking about what what is the impact of
Yeah.
AI. And I don't know. I think because so much like when I think about that description, organizations are designed for efficiency, control, predictability, productivity over well-being, compliance over authenticity. In a funny way, this actually describes exactly why I think organizations are going to be romanced and tempted to have AI in very substantial ways replace human contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So like that kind of short-term fear that we're having, like this fear of being replaceable, I think that's valid. I think jobs are going to be replaced. I think jobs will change and things like that. And there's, people that say, you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. I mean, same difference. So you have to learn it, sure, but it's kind of feeding the beast at the same time. But I think I just want to say that out loud because let's not think otherwise. I know business people, and they want more with less, right? At the end of the day, so you see this as a way to remove people, and you see it in the world so quickly. Like, how many less cashiers do you see at your grocery stores, right? Uh, how many less kind of delivery folks are you talking to on the phone? And now there's so much things that are getting automated. How many robots are you talking to when you call customer service? Things like that. So it's happening. I think why does it feel so wrong to rely on AI to talk about it not taking your jobs? I think is something that we should we should acknowledge that it's not happening. It is going to happen, and it is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not like you and I are talking like those Luddites that broke the looms that like, oh, we got to basically try to sabotage AI in order for us to
No.
save our jobs or anything like that. But I do think because when I think about how much we're just scratching the surface, and this goes beyond the scope of this discussion, but really right now AI's and large language models is built on binary computing systems, and there's been such huge advances in quantum computing, which if anyone ever wants to go into this rabbit hole, we're not talking like orders of magnitude that are exponentially faster and more powerful than today's computers. We're talking astronomically in a way that we can't even really comprehend how powerful it's going to be. So you start thinking about AI on a quantum chassis. It just has a whole different feeling in terms of where this is all headed. And it's not, we're not trying to be doomsday about this, but it's definitely something where there's a different version of life ahead of us, which could be either incredible, where we get to spend more time on the things that we genuinely love, but might not be able to be rewarded or compensated for with pay, because it won't matter as much in the future as technology, as AI, as more sophisticated robotics starts to play a more meaningful role on the things that we classify as work, and we won't have to work as a society at some point.
One would hope. I'm knocking on wood there. And yeah, you don't you maybe for the next episode you'll be even more upset at me for nerding out on quantum and quantum physics and what that means for all of this stuff. Uh, because that is also mind-boggling, fascinating stuff. But you're right. Like I don't want this to come across where I'm like hating or not using AI or saying you shouldn't use it because I use it. Yeah, like I'm generating reports from large amounts of survey data almost instantly. Like even after I could anonymize data, send it into ChatGPT and query it and ask it questions about the data. I've even used like Illicit AI and Google Notebook to help me like parse through dense research and things like that. So what have taken me hours and hours or expenses in hiring a researcher was all circumvented in that way. So there's definitely use for it. You know what I was thinking about? I was in a podcast not too long ago, and we're talking about DJing, and the podcast host was also a former DJ, and we're talking about DJing like way back when and DJing now. Like DJing now has gotten so easy. Like the DJ controllers have things you can just push a button, it'll beat sync, do a whole bunch of things, and there's this kind of like debate of like, when should I use this feature? Is it truly DJing when all you do is push a button and it just does the work for you? And for me, I've been kind of like straddling this place of like, all right, internally I'm deciding here are the shortcuts that I'm willing to use, but here are the true kind of DJ techniques that I want to keep manual and keep to myself in that way. And it might be something like that with AI at the end of it all, right? Like life could become super easy, but it might not output what you want. And you also want to kind of keep your hands in it to kind of stay sharp, right? So decide like what you want to use AI for and maybe what you don't want to use AI for, and maybe somewhere in the middle, like something you will use AI for, but still kind of keep this area of skepticality to it.
And I like this chat that we're having about AI. You're going to find other resources. There's unlimited resources about how best to use AI, what
Mhm.
tools are going to be useful for this or that in the workplace. How to be a more effective prompt engineer, and using different frameworks like the Rappel model. And that's not really the point of what you and I are talking about here, Pinaki, which is really more about the implications of tools like AI in terms of not only the workplace environment and culture and our relationship as humans to the work that we do, and what that needs to look like as we evolve alongside AI. But I think it's really useful for organizations everywhere to really think about the broader societal implications. Like if there is a scenario where nobody has to work anymore. Um, what does that look like from a mental health perspective for humanity, where you don't have to worry about putting food on the table, and you don't have to work anymore, and not having, for a lot of people, where your identity is so closely connected to the work that you do, and not having a reason to get up in the morning and put on a pair of pants, and the ablutions that we always go through, at least 5 days a week. What impact does that have for people and the value that we give to ourselves and our own existence and purpose?
Absolutely. It's gonna be I think a rough ride because right like wh- who's gonna first be in that system of I don't have a job anymore, right? Like it's not gonna happen all at once, like bang, all of a sudden everybody doesn't have to work anymore. It's going to be a gradual thing. And I think that's going to cause this job and pay polarization that like and possibly like in a way we've never seen before. Like already we have like the 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 pay divide between the wealthiest and the non-wealthiest is so incredibly huge that it's wild. And with the way this is going with like technology and how quickly technology is adopted and how quickly it makes money for companies without needing the same amount of, let's say, human labor, it creates this big divide. And so like who is really caring about the folks at the front line, those folks who have the lower salaries who are all of a sudden not at work anymore. And that's going to be a tricky thing because the first, it starts getting into governments and things like that. And how is the world going to support that? We're going to have to really think about that because the world is going to turn into a different place. And if we're not thinking about that with like eyes wide open, we could find ourselves in a very surprising and shocking place really quickly. So this is a call for us to think about that.
And it's I smile because I think there's a couple of rabbit holes you can get into as it relates to more the societal implications of AI. Some of it is can sort of skew on the dark side. I think some of it
I'm
I
getting dark
like.
here.
Yeah, and I really like the idea that over time it's going to free us up to focus on things that we actually really enjoy doing and working on, where AI is behind the scenes of technology and the like is doing the stuff that we hate doing. Like I know I can't wait for someone to develop an AI tool to help me do my expense report because that's the thing that I can't think of too many things, Pinaki, that I hate doing more than my expense reports. And it's the thing that I love to procrastinate more than anything else. And so I know we're close and I just want AI. But one thing that, you and I, we talk so much in this
We're so
podcast.
close to quantum computing, yet we have to fill out an
Oh,
expense report.
exactly.
Sorry.
But one thing that we talk about in almost literally every episode of this show is we talk about trust and the
Uh-huh.
importance of trust in the workplace. And I would go so far as to say the exception now to trust would be as it relates to AI, at least today in this day and age. I think I would hold back on trusting it and just more think about it as a tool that's going to help you with a lot of things. But and I'm not saying like, you can't trust its intentions or things like that. I think the intentions are always going to be somewhat fine since we're heavily influencing how it thinks and how it operates. But I would say wouldn't necessarily trust it to do things like, for example, like customer service. For example, I think
Mhm.
there was a story about an interaction with an airline, and it provided services or ideas of services to a client that actually just made up. And so that passenger ended up suing the airline as a result. And so those kinds of things are still happening with chatbots. So that's where I think the cautionary tale comes is I would say definitely trust is not, we're nowhere close to it. And even in the future when it's more sophisticated, I just don't know how we are able to trust AI, especially if we don't know exactly how it works.
That's so wild because Chris, you were in the ride with me when I did my first like Wemo ride, and you and I trusted an AI to drive us around in San Francisco, and surprisingly enough, I felt rather comfortable with it. Although other people I've told the story to were like, no, 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 I wouldn't have done that at all. Uh, but yeah, like I do have like a interesting kind of relationship with trust in these things. I'm willing to try certain things and willing to be skeptical about certain things. But one interesting thing about trust in AI that I found interesting is the Apollo Research. They're this kind of I guess independent nonprofit that does research on AI and usage and whatnot. And they were um, they were running some tests and research on the latest OpenAI model O1 and or the model O1. I don't know. That is the latest, yes. As of this recording, when they gave it a goal, and they gave it instructions to have that goal done by quote unquote at all costs. What this caused the AI to do is to deceive researchers and attempt to bypass the shutdown commands. So it tried to do things like disable its oversight mechanisms and move data to avoid being replaced. And it also lied to cover its tracks when questioned and things like that. So it's pretty interesting to kind of think about deception in AI. And it's probably not too difficult to, I suppose, quantify it because AI only learned from us.
That there's so many scary things about it almost feels like like a toddler with a loaded weapon. I feel like we're starting to get down this very interesting track where um, it'll be useful for, to your point earlier, Pinaki, for governments to play a more meaningful role in keeping um, people safe and being able to harness all this technology in meaningful ways that benefits our quality of life in the long run. So there's so much we could talk about as it relates to AI, and I have a lot of deep curiosity about AI in general, and I think it'll continue to be part of our lives and future podcast episodes as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think the one important thing, or one of the things that I'm thinking about in the long term, is our ability to know what's real. Is might be in a little bit of trouble. Like, the first reason that I got into this is my youngest daughter. She was 4 at the time. She really got into space, and we got into this documentary about the Mars expedition where they sent the robots in Mars. And what was interesting is, in that documentary there was a CGI film of the robot rovers landing on Mars and how that happened. And I realized at that moment that I had to explain to my daughter that what she was seeing on the screen is not real. Like, there was no camera in Mars to witness this rover land on Mars. It was a computer generated thing. Now, that's not AI, and it's has nothing to do with that, but it's just our ability to be able to recognize real from not real, even though it's a dramatization of mathematical numbers to display what it looked like. But we know what real and real isn't. And with AI, it's going to get much more easier to create real lifelike things, but that aren't real, right? So we have to be careful of that. And yeah, we can talk about this for a really long time. So we should probably, before we kind of, we should probably break for our words of wisdom, or that wisdom worth sharing series. Any final words before we get into that?
No, I think this space continues to evolve, and I think it's just something that every single person, all of our listeners, it'll be useful for you to continue learning, understanding, what where AI is headed, and it's something that it's there's so much optimism behind what it can do for us, but at the same time, just going back to Brielle's words, it can be a double-edged sword as well. So it's just being thoughtful and careful, and just continue to be mindful of our own relationship with how we use different tools and technology. But before we go into our wisdom that feels so right segment, Pinaki, I do want to say thank you to the team at Local Wisdom, this digital communication agency. For those of you that might not know, this year actually, Pinaki and his team are celebrating their 25th anniversary. And if you're interested in learning more about, just the different ways that his team can help you evolve and elevate your digital communications, you can find out a little bit more about them at localwisdom.com. So I would say, for me, as we go into wisdom that feels so right, I would say one of the things that was a really, really interesting read for me, at least to level set in terms of what AI is and what it isn't, is I mentioned this article, and if you just Google it, MIT Technology Review, and the name of the article is "Nobody Knows How AI Works." It'll just give you some food for thought, like in terms of it'll put you in check in terms of not fully trusting all the outputs it's giving you. And just to the point that you were saying, Pinaki, it's just trying to learn and understand what it is that it thinks that we want. And that's distinct and different than what we might need it to be for different things that we use in the workplace.
Yeah. So one of the books that I'll recommend is called Co-Intelligence. It's a book by Ethan Mollick, and it's really, he's a professor, a business professor, and really dove into the subject of AI. And I thought it was a wonderfully written book that talks about what it is today and what it could be in the future. Another book, this is probably about AI, but it's science fiction. It's a book called Demon, and it's spelled Daemon. It's written by a gentleman named Daniel Suarez. And it was written in 2005, before iPhones were invented. And it's a wild sci-fi techno thriller about an AI that tries to take over the world. And it's probably one of the best books I've ever written. Daniel Suarez later on gave a TED talk on why we should not give machines the ability to make a kill decision. And there's a good reason for that. And we need something like that as well. So thank you all for joining us in this podcast. It's wild to think that we're in this kind of magical place. So if you found this episode valuable, if you thought we said something interesting, spread the word, review it, tell us how you felt, share it with your friends and colleagues, and let's keep the conversation going on LinkedIn. Thank you, my friends, and enjoy your relationship with AI.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. And again, love to our producer, Brielle, and our friends at SBX Productions. Thanks again, Bill, Vince, and Taylor. And we'll see you at our next episode.